Hey folks, welcome to this tutorial where I show you how to make this motion graphic animation loop. It's going to be a fairly straightforward tutorial, I think. There are a few technicalities. We're going to be using geometry nodes to distribute and subdivide these cubes. We're also going to be doing a quick effects which we'll use in Blender to do the explosion at the beginning of each frame to loop it. It will consist of a quick explode and some force fields. Without further ado, let's get to it. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to change your frame rate to 30 frames per second. Usually VJ loops and stuff like that, they like to work around 30 frame per second mark. We're also going to change your timeline. So the end point is 241 frames. The actual loop is going to be 240 frames, but we're going to be using the 241st frame as we're going to render that out as a texture to put on the explode modifier plane, so we get a seamless loop. So from here we should be ready to go. I'll also point you in the direction of, where is it, this website here, which is a VJAMM. It's basically a BPM to frames per second calculator, so it's called AV BPM. You'll find it on the support page where it says AV BPM calculator, and basically what we do is we type in 30 in the frames per second. I'm actually using a beat which is, I think it's 120 beats per minute. You then click solve, and so it will be 15 frames per beat. It's going to be 16 beats, so 4 bars, that's 15 times 16, which will give you a value of 240, which 240 frames. From here we're going to open up Blender and go into your geometry nodes section. We're not going to do geometry nodes just yet, we're going to make the instance object. So get your default cube, then we're going to go into the modifier section. We're going to add a bevel. So add the bevel. We'll increase this value, say 0.25. We'll give it 4 segments. Okay, we'll then apply that bevel modifier. I'll then go into edit mode. By the way, my screencast keys are down here in the bottom left, so if you're wondering what I'm clicking, just look down here. I'm going to hit Control R, add a loop cut there, Control R, add a loop cut there, Control R, add a loop cut there, and with edge selection active, I'm then going to hit Shift Out, select that loop, and of course we've already got this loop selected. I'm then going to hit Control B, and we're going to bevel that out ever so slightly, probably around about there. Just close this menu. I'm then going to hit E, and then Escape to cancel that, and then I'm going to click Alt S, and that will scale it on its bounds. So we're going to scale it inwards, around about there. I'll go out of edit mode, I'm going to hit Z, shade smooth, and then we're going to add another bevel modifier, probably around about 0.025 I'd say, and we'll give 4 segments. I mean, you can have less than 4, you probably get away with 2, but I'm going to add 4. So this is going to be our instance object, so I'm going to name it instance. Excellent. Right, so we can hide that object for now. From here we're going to add the actual object that's going to be the emitter. So we'll add mesh cube, go into edit mode, and let's scale that up by a factor of 50, so S then 50. Then we'll go out of edit mode. I'll go into wireframe mode so we can see what we're doing here. We'll actually name this, well, I'm going to name mine subdiv because it's all about subdivision. So we're going to add a new geometry nodes. I'm going to call this, again, subdiv for subdivision. We'll drag this out. First thing we'll do is we're going to search for subdivide mesh. We'll add that in, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. it subdivides the mesh. We're going to add a geometry, join geometry, or you can search for join geometry. So a join geometry. We're then going to be adding a separate geometry. So separate geometry. Excellent. I'm going to be plugging this into there, and it will actually be the inverted that we plug into the subdivision mesh. And then we're going to add a random value. So search for random value. The random value is going to be set to Boolean, and on the separate geometry it's going to be face. And then we're going to take the value from the Boolean operation into the selection of the separate geometry. We're going to be taking the selection into the top of the join geometry. So as you can see, it's randomly subdividing this cube, and based on the probability will be based on what the chances of it being subdivided are going to be. But we're going to leave that set to 0.5. I'm then going to cancel that. We're going to cancel this, so we're going to cut that off. And with these 4 nodes, we're going to box select them. And I'm going to hit Shift G to put them into a group. So for the group input, we're going to drag the geometry socket into the group input, and we're going to grab the seed value of the random value into the group input. And for the group output, we're going to select this geometry socket and plug it into the group output. We're then going to tab out of the node group. We'll call this node group SD for subdivide. That'll do. So from here we can plug the subdivision, the geometry into the geometry, and the geometry into this geometry. And then what we can do is we can duplicate this, and then we'll change the seed value. I'm going to duplicate it again. We'll change the seed value, and we'll do it one more time for good measures, maybe 2 more times. Change the seed value, and 1 more. And we change the seed value, and as you can see, it's subdivided random faces. And basically we're going to be taking our instance object, this thing here, and we're going to be applying it to each face on here, and we're going to use the edges. We're going to use a proximity node to calculate the distance of each edge, so then our instance will be scaled in line with the bounds of the edges on the subdivided mesh. All will be revealed as we get further into this, so there's not many more nodes to go. It's quite a straightforward process from here. So the first thing I'm going to do is add, which way should I go about this? Let's say instance on points, so search instance on points. We'll add that here, and then we're going to add a mesh to points, so search for mesh to points. We'll add that in here. I'm going to change the size down to maybe 0.025. These vertices, we're going to change this to faces. Okay. And then we're going to add a capture attribute. So this is going to capture the rotational value, or I might add the geometry proximity first, which is going to calculate the scale. I'm going to hit Shift A, search for geometry proximity. Geometry proximity, there we go. And this is going to be set to edges, so the edges of each subdivided box is going to be, we're going to use the distance of the edges to calculate the scale, and we'll plug the geometry into the target. Okay. Let's just check that the points are working. Yep. So we've generated points on the mesh. So, you know, these represent the center of each square. And then we're going to drag in our instance. And we'll set the geometry to the instance. So it's starting to come clear now, guys. And we need to get the rotational values correct as well. I might just scale this cube up again. So let's hit S2. Okay. I'm also going to go in front face view, go into edit mode, and select face selection mode. I'm going to select this front face, and I'm going to hit X and delete the face. So basically, it's now, you know, we can see inside. So let's do the rotation. So we're going to do Shift A and search for align Euler to vector. We're going to capture the. We're going to use the capture attribute to capture the normals to tell the cubes which direction they should be emitting from. So Shift A, search, capture attribute. Okay, I'm going to plug that in between here. So yep, that should be correct. We're then going to search for normal. So this is going to give us the normal value. Oh, this should be set to vector, I believe. And then we're going to plug the normal into the value. So now we're capturing the normal of the faces of the subdivided, each subdivided mesh. And then we're going to use that attribute into the vector of the align Euler to vector, which will then plug into the rotation. We'll set it to Z, and as you can see, it's basically doing what it's supposed to be doing. From here, let me give you an example of what this is actually doing a bit better actually. So if I just hide that, and we're going to add a, you skip this part, you don't do this bit. I'm just doing this for an example. We're going to add a round cube. Yep, it's set to 1, okay. And then I'm going to scale that up, say, by 10. Maybe 20 actually, so S2, let's do it again. I'm then going to add the geometry node, and we'll add the subdivision. Right, so what this does, if we didn't have the align Euler to vector, they'd all be pointing upward. Whereas if we capture the normal value of the faces, then it basically tells the geometry node system which direction to point the cubes in. Well, to point your instances in. So I'll delete that. We'll re-enable the original. I'll mute the instance that we made. So with this selected, I might just add another. Just subdivide the mesh one more time. So that will be 4. Then that will be 5, just so we got plenty of subdivision in there. Okay, let's re-enable. Hang on, let me just double check that I've got everything set up here correctly before we continue. Let's just move this across. Okay, that looks good. Yep. So if we re-enable the instance, I'm going to select the instance, hit numpad period, just so we can zoom into it. Go to front view. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select all the vertices. This is in edit mode, and hit G, Z, and I'll bring that up maybe 3 units. Could do it 4 units. If I go out of edit mode, now you can see that all these are offset because the origin of the original is offset. I might even take that out one more, so G, Z. And then we'll hide that instance. See, all these are offset now. So what I might do from here, for example, let me see. Okay, I'm going to select this. I'm going to go into edit mode. I could like select this face, for example, hit Shift D to duplicate it, and then G, X, or actually RZ180. Basically got 2 faces there, but I've just offset them slightly. I might hit GX and we'll just bring that in 1 meter so it's offset. Okay, I'm happy with that. We'll take this one, hit Shift D, and then RZ180, and then we'll drag that in 1GX. Just make sure I've got no intersection. I might even do the back face. I'm going to take that back face, I'll go into 3, numpad 3 to hit side view, and then Shift D, and then hit Y, and then maybe scale that up by 2. I'm also going to change my viewport because at the moment it is clipping. In order to do that, we'll select this view here and the clipping value, say by 10,000. There we go. Now we can see everything without it clipping out. I'll probably have to do the same with the camera when it comes to rendering. If I go into look dev mode, that's what we've got so far. Okay, we should get on with the materials now, guys. The materials is a fairly straightforward operation. So I'm just going to bring this window out. I'm then going to set this to shader editor. We'll drag this out a bit more. Hit N to close that window. N to close that window. There we go. The instance object, this is what we're going to add the material to. With the instance selected, I'm going to go over to my node editor, my shader editor, add new. Okay, excellent. Right, we're going to use complementary colours, so we can use any colours for this. On the original, let me open up the original quick, hang on, if I can locate it quick. If I open up, say, this image, I'll just bring it across. Complementary colours, you know, pink, the opposite to pink is almost like aqua colours. Technically it's kind of green, but it's blue with a bit of green, you know, aqua. If the cubes are going to be pink, the lighting's going to be blue. If the cubes are orange, the lighting's going to be a darker blue. Or if the cubes are going to be blue, then we're going to have rim lights of like orange, for example. And I'll explain how that works. I don't know if you're aware of how complementary colours work, but for example, complementary colours are opposite colours on the colour wheel. So if I select a colour here, a complementary colour to this point would be over here, and the same as a complementary colour to red would be up here. But you can use quarters, so you know it's quite flexible. So from here anyway, I'm going to add, let's say, a colour ramp. So we're going to add converter colour ramp. This is going to be set to constant, and we're going to add several flags here. So maybe 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we'll add 4 flags. So the first one we're going to set to black. The second one I'm going to set it to, say, light pink. The third one will be sort of a hot pink. And the fourth one we're going to set it to grey. Let's go into look dev mode. Oh, it is in look dev mode, excellent. So then we'll plug the base colour into there. It's all coming out as pink because the majority is pink there. But now I'm going to add an object info, which it's got a random value on there, which we can use. Object info should be input object info. Of course you can use the search function. And then we'll plug the random into here. And now it's generating sort of random colours. I want a few more blacks in there. I don't want that much pink, just enough. And then maybe bring this down, or bring this down. Okay, I'm happy with that. We're also going to use this random value to generate the metallicness and the roughness. If I say add a math node, converter, math, we'll set it to multiply, and then I'm going to set the bottom value to 1. I'll take the random value from that into the top, and I will plug that into the metallic with an invert node, color, invert color. And the reason why I'm inverting it is because I'm also going to take this value into the roughness, and usually the metallic to your roughness values are inverted, so you know, white will be black and black will be white. I'm then going to add another color ramp, add converter color ramp. With your roughness, white is completely rough and black is completely, you know, shiny, like glossy, and I don't want complete gloss, so I'm going to turn this value up to say 0.1, so it's not 100% shiny, it has a bit of roughness, and the reason I do that is because light bounces off it a lot better. So that's basically the shader editor complete. Now we need to get on with the animation. Actually, I'm going to be using cycles, so let's just sort out the lighting first. So we'll go to cycles, go to render view. I've got no light set up, so the first light I'm going to do, Shift A, oh no, sorry, Shift A, add light, and we'll go for sun. Let's just drag this out so we can see what we're doing. The position of the sun doesn't matter too much, but we'll drag it out anyway. And let's say we're going to duplicate that, and we'll bring that out to around about here. So this is going to be the backlight, like the rim light, and this is going to be the frontal light. So with the front light, I'm going into side view here. We're going to want it pointing up at a slight angle, say around about there, and we're going to do the complete opposite with the one at the back. So this one is actually going to be pointing down slightly. So with this lamp, the front sun lamp, I'm going to go into front view just to see what we're doing. I'm going to go into rendered view. This is what we got so far, okay. With the sun angle, which is kind of simulating the size of the sun, I want this to be quite a high number, so I'll say about 25, maybe a bit more, 50, because I don't want harsh shadows. The smaller this number, the harsher the shadows, the bigger the number, the softer the shadows, and I'll probably set it to a value of about 4. Okay, I'm happy with that. Maybe we'll increase the size of that to 75. Yep. We're going to keep this as pure white. The second sun, which is the sun behind, which is going to be the rim light, we're going to set this to blue. So I'm just going to mute the sun that we just done, and the second sun we're going to set this to blue. Set this to maybe 4, a value of 4, and we're going to set the size to 75. Okay, we're going to actually turn the brightness up a bit more. I might change the colour a bit as well, just so it's going to be a bit more in line with the pink. It's a slight greeny tinge, maybe not that green. Actually, I'll be happy with that. I'm going to turn the value up to about 8 maybe, or maybe a bit more, say 10. Maybe change the angle slightly. Hang on, let me just check out what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to go -80 for the angle on the x-axis for that one. Maybe a bit less. Actually, we'll go for a bit less, so I'm going to say -40. We'll enable the front sun. This is what we got so far. I also added a couple of sun lamps to the side in the original blend file, so I might do that as well. So I'm going to look dev mode, and we're going to, let's say, I'm going to duplicate that sun lamp. I'm going to bring it over to here. I'm going to set the colour to white. Set the size to say 90, and we want it 0 degrees on the x-axis. Oh no, sorry, 90 degrees on the x-axis, and then we want to rotate it on the z-axis by 90. So it's basically pointing towards the side of the scene. We're going to hit Alt D, not Shift D, Alt D, because it becomes an instance, so then when we change the values of one, it will change the values of the other. And then say X, take it on the X-axis, I'm going to rotate that by 180. Now I'm going to mute the first two suns, and then we're going to this view. Okay, so that's what it's given us. I might take the value down to say 4, so it's a bit duller. Then we'll add the original sun and then the backlight sun, which is blue. Okay, I'm happy with that so far. Let's set up the camera now. So with my camera, where is my camera in relation to the scene? Okay, my camera's here. So we might take this back plane and increase this, because I'm looking here and I can see there's a lot of empty space, and we can fill that empty space just by simply scaling up this plane here. So go to 3, face select mode, and then I'll just scale that up round about there. Tab out of edit mode. Excellent, I'm happy with that. So now we'll set up the camera. I've got my camera in a rough position of where I want it. Let's just so you bring your camera out until you're kind of out of the bounds. I'd say around about here. It's going to be different for your scene depending on your seed values. So I'm going to go for minus 180 meters. I'm still on. Hang on, let's just drag this across as well, because we've got a bit more room so we can see what we're doing. So on frame 1, I'm going to insert a keyframe. I'm also going to change this shader editor into a graph editor, so we're going to need this. So go to your graph editor. We don't need that. We just want to see what we're doing here. It says the keyframe for the Y location. I'm then going to skip all the way to the end, which should be frame 241. And I'm going to change this value, so we're going to be basically zooming all the way in to something around about, oh, that's our original instance, I'll remove that in a minute, so around about here, or wherever you see fit. I might go for 20 meters. I'm going to add a keyframe there. As you can see, it's added a bezier, so it will start off slow, it will increase in speed, and then it will end by slowing down. We don't want that, we want a consistent speed. So in your graph editor, with all your keyframes selected, you're going to hit T and select linear interpolation. So now it's just a constant speed, so if I hit play, it's travelling through the scene. Excellent. So halfway through the animation, so on frame 120, I want the camera to zoom in really fast. So I'm going to set a keyframe there. I'm then going to skip, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip 5 frames. I'm then going to change the zoom magnification to the focal length to 40mm. The original focal length, hang on, let me just skip back, I think it was 24mm. Yep, so it's on 24mm on frame 120, because this will be on beat. So on the beat, it's then going to skip 5 frames and zoom into 40mm, but then I want a longer fall off of where it zooms back out to 24, so maybe frame 150, and then we'll drop it down to 24mm. I'll just play this back so we can kind of get an idea of what it's doing. So it's zooming in. Boom. Like that. Excellent. And then it will go back to the beginning. the next part, we're going to add a bit of camera wobble. So I'm going to go to this section here. I'm going to add a keyframe on location, a keyframe for X and Z, and we're also going to add one on the X axis for rotation and Z axis for rotation. So we're going to be using our modifiers, and make sure all your keyframes, by the way, are on frame 1. On the X location, go to modifiers here, and we're going to add noise modifier. So when we play, it should shake on the X location. If I turn up the strength, you can see what it's doing there. And we're going to change this value, the scale, to maybe 50. So there's a nice bit of movement there. Maybe we don't want the strength up as high, so maybe 25. Want it to be nice and subtle. But I'll just turn it up for the minute. We can turn it back down in a bit. We want to expand this restrict frame range, and we select that, and we say we want it to start from frame 1 and end on frame 240, because it's going to be 240 frames, and we want it to blend in, so it doesn't all of a sudden start. We want it to blend in over a period of 60 frames coming in and 60 frames coming out. So it adds like a fall off, so it takes 60 frames for it to work in its full motion. We'll change the offset as well. So I'm happy with that. Okay. And now we want the rotation to correlate with the location. So if the camera is moving on the x-axis left to right, that means it's actually going to rotate in correlation on the z-axis, because if the camera is moving right, then it's going to rotate to the left. So we're going to take this X location noise modifier, we're going to copy it, and we're going to paste it in the Z-axis. We're definitely going to have to turn the strength down because it's going to go crazy. So maybe we'll set that to 1 for the minute. As the camera moves left, it rotates right. As it moves right, it rotates left. We can turn the strength down on that because that's a bit too strong. We want it nice and subtle. So I'd say around about there. So we're going to copy the modifier from the X location, and we're going to paste it on the Z location, but now we're going to change the offset so it's kind of like a different seed. Is it actually moving on the Z location? Yeah, so we're moving on the Z location as well. I might turn the Z location up to say 100 just so it's a bit more apparent, and then we're going to copy the Z location noise modifier, and we're going to punch it into the X rotation, because obviously as the camera moves up it will rotate downwards. As the camera moves down, the camera should rotate upwards. So we're always looking for kind of like a median center point. So I'll then paste that modifier in there. Again, we're going to turn the strength down. This time the camera is rotating in the wrong axis, so I'll hit -1. There we go. Now it's all kind of moving fluently, exactly how we want it. Right, where do we go from here? So that's all the modifiers done. Okay, I'm happy with that. So we can now close this window. In fact, I might close it completely. Little crosshair down here. Excellent. Just select my camera. So now it's time for rendering. We're not actually going to render the whole sequence just yet, because obviously we have to add the explode modifier, but we need to render a frame, the very last frame at frame 241. So we're going to render this frame out here. We're then going to add that as a plane on frame 1, which is going to explode using the explode modifier. So right, let's render this frame out. I'm going to choose a location. I've already got a location chosen. Excellent. I'm actually going to set the resolution to 200 because I want quite a high resolution image. You can set yours to 100 if you want. Let's go to light paths and sampling. So sampling, I'm going to set it to 0.025 so it renders a bit quicker. And the samples, I'm going to select it as 512. For the bounces, I'll turn those down to 2. We don't need reflective or refractive caustics. And I'm going to hit render and I'll see you when that's finished. Hey guys, welcome back. So it's finished rendering. So now I'm going to save this image. Save image as, let me just choose the location. Okay, so I've got a location here. I'll save it as explode plane. You can call it whatever you like. I'm going to keep it as a PNG. I don't want any compression. You can have compression. It will save you space. And then I'll click save image as. From here, I'm going to close this. I'm then going to go to frame 1. I'm going to select my camera, zoom into it by hitting numpad period, and then going to hit Shift S and cursor to selected. So then my plane is going to appear here when I add it. So I'm going to hit Shift A, image, images as planes. I'm then going to select the plane which I just rendered out, this one. I'm going to have it set to shadeless. Yeah, we'll set it to shadeless. So we're going to import the image. I'm then going to drag it, say, GY by about 20 units, 20 meters. Could do it a bit more actually. Drag it 30 meters, GY. We drag it 30 meters away from the camera. So when I go to camera view, it should be really tiny. Then I'm going to hit S, Control, and I'm going to scale it up. So it just covers, it engulfs the camera view. So scale, doesn't matter if it's slightly bigger because it's going to be part of a zoom effect anyway. And then in my camera view, if I go to, oh, we're going to have to open up the shader editor as well. So I'm going to change this geometry nodes window to shader editor. You can just click shading. I need to stay in this window so my screencast keys always remain, because if I go here, my screencast keys are going to disappear. So let's change this to shader editor. I can delete that. I can delete this. And then I plug that into there. Okay. Let's just check that I've got it first. Oh, not the alpha. Just check that it's all in there. Yeah, excellent. So that's working. I'm going to change the shader in a minute because at the moment we don't want any reflections from this plane. I'll show you what I mean. So if I add a shader principled and I plug that into there, you can see it's a different color now. Also, I want this set to sRGB. Yeah, we'll keep it as sRGB. And your transform, when you render, this also should be set to standard, so don't use Filmic. Yeah, for now, we're just going to plug this into here. We're going to change that in a minute. We'll just do the explode modifier first. With the plane selected, I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to add one loop cut in the middle. I'm then going to select all the faces and then right click on my mouse and click subdivide. We'll open up this menu and let's say we'll subdivide it 64 times. So there's a nice bit of geometry there to work with. I'll then go into object, quick effects, quick explode. Right off the bat, If I push play, it's going to explode. All the bits are going to fall down. We don't really want that, so we'll go back to frame 1. Go to the explode modifier. No, we'll go to the particle settings. So I'm going to have, say, 1,000 shards. So it's 1,000 shards there. I'm then going to go down here to field weights. I'm going to turn off gravity. Also with the velocity, I might turn the velocity up to say 10. Let's just see what that does. Okay. Hang on, and we want it to start on frame 2 as well. Frame 2, and then frame 2. For lifetime, I might have the lifetime to say 75 frames, and maybe a lifetime random value of 0.25, so they don't disappear at the same time. I'm just going to click rewind and play, see what we've got there so far. Okay. The more normal value, I'm going to set that back down to say 2. I'm going to want rotation, dynamic, and I can't remember which way to set these up. Okay, so they're rotating on that value there. We turn that up, and that should. Angular velocity as well. We'll set this to, I don't know, we'll start off with 2, see how that goes. Then I'll click rewind, play. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Now we need to add a force field to push them outwards. With the plane selected, I'm going to hit Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm then going to add Shift A, force field, and we'll click force. So we'll go on to the force field settings. I'm going to have a value to start, let's say 10, see how that affects it. Okay, a bit too much, maybe 5, let's see how that affects it. We're going to want the camera to travel through that. Let's look at it from the camera perspective. Okay, we're going to need more force. In fact, I might bring those 2 back a bit because they're still a bit close to the camera. So with the force field selected, shift select the plane so you have them both selected, and we're going to bring that a bit closer, G, Y, a bit closer to here, so then the camera's got a bit more time to travel so we can see the particles for longer. I'm also going to select that plane, go into camera view again, and we're going to scale this up. And you want it so the plane is just on the outside of the camera, which mine is. That's perfect. So then I'm going to hit rewind, go into particle settings again. I'm going to hit play. There we go. So we're travelling through that hole which we've just created. Okay, so I'm happy with those particle settings. You can adjust it to suit your needs. You know, you don't have to have a force field, you can have a vortex or anything. From here I'll go to, oh hang on, I've got to save my file before I can save the cache. So if I go over here, save as, I'll save it here as sub div tutorial. There we go. So now that I've saved it, I can go to my cache. If you click use library path, it will save your cache in the folder where you saved your file, but I actually, where it's a small simulation, it's not going to take up much memory in the blend file. Uncheck this box, and then when I bake the cache, it will be baked into the actual blend file itself. So then I'm going to click bake all dynamics, and now that is baked in to the blend file itself. So when I push play, oh, let's just hide that as well because we don't want to see that in the render. So right, basically this last frame is the same as the first frame because we rendered out the last frame. I'll change the endpoint to 240, and then when we push play, this is going to smash through into the scene, and then as we get near the end, one frame before the last, because if we click frame 241, that frame will be the first frame. So by having our end frame at 240, our first frame will look like it's looping in perfectly, if that makes sense. But that's basically the principle of this motion graphic loop. Just thinking if there's anything else I've missed. Oh, okay. With this first plane on frame 1, we don't want any reflections on the first couple of frames, but then as it develops, we kind of want reflections to appear, if that makes sense. Oh, what's all these doing here? We could delete all those. We don't need those. What I'm going to do here is if I add this in the shader editor, so with the exploding plane selected, we're going to rendered view. We are going to want reflections, but we're going to want them to gradually appear like this kind of thing. We'll take the roughness down to say 0.25. Yep, so we want the reflections to appear, but only after the shattering has started happening. So it kind of, these shards look like they're interacting with the scene. In order to do that, we're going to have, let's see, we're going to add a shader, mix shader, and then we're going to plug this into here. Actually, I'll just swap these round, so that one's in the top and the principal's in the bottom. So the bottom shader, let me take that to frame 1, is going to have the reflections, and the top shader is basically a throughput, so there'll be no reflections there. But on frame 1, we're going to actually use an input layer weight node, and we'll set it to Fresnel. Basically, you'll get more reflections at more of an angle. No Fresnel, there's going to be no reflection, and then as the Fresnel kicks in, there's going to be more reflection. So on frame 1, we're going to set this to 0, hit I. Actually, we can undo that, Control Z. On frame 2, we're going to set this to 0, so hit I to add a keyframe on the Fresnel. But then as we progress on to say frame 5, no, maybe a bit more, maybe frame 10, we're then going to add reflection by say 0.45. So now these shards are going to have reflection. And then I'll hit I there. There's no reflection, and as it progresses up to frame 10, or whatever frame number that was, yeah, frame 10, we're going to start seeing reflections. You can change how much glossiness you want. Actually, I might change that to 0.1, just so it's a bit shinier. And then you should see reflections from this explode modifier, from these shards from the scene appearing on here. So like if I were to unplug that, for example, you can see the reflections from the sun appearing on this, whereas, you know, without it, then you would get no reflections at all. Another thing, what we're going to do is with these shards, we're going to go to the modifiers, we're going to add a solidify modifier, so we've got a bit of depth to it, say 0.005. Actually, I might keep it at 0.01, 0.01, and then we're going to add a bevel modifier as well. We'll do even thickness, and then we're going to add a bevel modifier. This is going to increase your render times, but it's worth doing for the simple fact that you're going to create better reflections on the edges. So if I go to here, you should see the reflections a lot better. So let's go back a few frames. Yeah, so basically that's with the reflections and that's without. So it adds a bit of dynamicness to the scene. In fact, I'm going to change this for an L value. If I click that and we'll go to frame 10, I'm going to change that to 0.75, just so we've got more. Oh no, it's still a bit hard. We'll stick to the 0.45. Yeah, okay. That should be ready to render out. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to here. I'm going to change that to 100. I'm going to choose a location. In here I'll just say cache. I'll select that folder, PNG, RGB, onto 16. Make sure that you've got 240 frames selected. Go to frame 1, and then you're going to hit Control F12, and that's going to render out your image sequence. It's going to take a while, but when you've got all those images, you can take them into DaVinci Resolve to stitch all the frames together. So you literally just select all the frames, drag it into DaVinci Resolve, and yeah, you can render it out. Just make sure that when you render it out, you're rendering it out at 30 frames a second, and you know, if you overlay any track with 120 beats per minute, it should fit perfectly. When this is rendered out, I'll come back to you and I'll just show you the final result. If you found value in this tutorial, please hit subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps this channel. I've got plenty more tutorials planned in the pipeline. Thanks for watching.